Thank you for being here. This is our first hybrid grand rounds, and we're very excited to have Dr. Yifrah Kaminer here today. He's a professor emeritus in psychiatry and pediatrics at UConn, and he's really an internationally recognized expert in pediatrics psychiatry, and addiction medicine. So we're thrilled to have you here today. He's also applying for research grants. So I'll hand it over to you. This is a very exciting topic, and we'll talk for about 45 minutes, and then if anyone has questions, please feel free to chime in. Do you want questions at the end?
It's a large group, so we can ask a couple of questions.
All right, and if anyone
forget a little bit, don't say, okay, later, you know. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'll hand it over.
Okay, glad to be here. I even wore a jacket for you and a tie, something I don't do often anyway, but I said, I don't know, you know. So, as Dr. Podolsky said, I'm a child and psychiatrist. My main interest has always been adolescent high-risk behaviors, which includes suicidal behavior. I'm also interested in co-occurring depression. You know, it's one of my presentations. I won't address too much of it here, but basically, as you know from your experience, 70 to 80% of the people that we treat have at least one or more co-occurring psychiatric disorder on axis 1. Not to mention personality on axis 2, anywhere from internalizing disorders such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, more common among females, and externalizing disorders, which are ADHD, conduct disorder, and so forth, more often among males, even though, of course, there is males and females that exhibit all three of as well. So, you know, the horse have left the barn. Unfortunately, from my perspective, I have been still against legalization of marijuana because of its harmfulness to youth, and you know, I'm going to show you a material here. Nevertheless, I think retail facilities, stores will be open in Connecticut next summer. There's already a lot of trick or treat by the industry in terms of how many milligrams of THC or CBD you're supposed to have in a gummy bear. And they're cheating, and they're lying. It's business. I mean, people just want to sell more products, and vulnerable populations are youth and people with mental health disorders. So I'm also on the advisory board. It's a non-profit national organization called SENSE, March Approach to Marijuana. If you're interested, you know, get on the website and see what's going on there. And also, we have founded about 5 to 6 years a research society for the study of marijuana. We meet annually. Actually, we haven't met for years because of COVID, but we finally met this summer. We also have a journal. So those of you who might be interested in marijuana, look at the website of the Research Society on marijuana, and you may find some good information there. It's more scientific, so it's not like pro and con. It's more like what are all kind of updates that you know, we are dealing with, because you know it's a very dynamic field. Things are happening all the time. Okay, so this is me. Let's try something else. Entry. Which one do you want to use this? Okay, thank you. So disclaimer, I'm receiving royalties for authors' books. You can find them on Amazon and the American Psychiatric Association. My kids would like me to sell as many copies as Harry Potter, so please be cheap. But you know, the latest book is an edited book with Dr. Ken Winters. It has 26 chapters. Each of one of them written by an expert that had to twist their hands because experts don't like to write chapters, but I said, listen, this is really important. There are also interesting chapters beside the one on marijuana, on maternal addiction, which is also very important. What happened to young women who are pregnant with, you know, with kids who are potentially going to get harmed and use drugs, and co-occurring disorders and so forth. Okay, just an example. I mentioned to you this was our last meeting last summer. We had a couple of keynote speakers, and of course a bunch of us that presented stuff. So those of you who have keen interest in marijuana check out our website, and maybe you will come to our next annual meeting in Long Beach, California. Wonderful destination. So hey, why not? And we don't charge much compared to other organizations. Really, registration, especially for trainees, students, and so forth, is very, very low. And also our conferences are very inexpensive, like $100 to $200 conferences compared to hundreds of dollars you pay for to APA or for the other meetings. So anyway, it's a good place to meet people who are really on the cusp of the research. Okay, what makes me an expert? A lot of things make me an expert. Sounds very humble. But we have been one of the 4 sites of the largest study ever conducted in the universe on cannabis treatment of youth, N equals 600. So each site had to recruit about 150 adolescents. There's still so much data from the study that people still are analyzing, and a lot of time we get called and say, can we have access to the data? And this data is actually, it was funded by CSET, the Center for Substance Abuse Treatment, which is a federal agency. So the data is available for everyone if people are interested. And we actually had a couple of studies, which I can't show you today, but or maybe I will mention them because it's one of my presentations, about depression and suicidal behavior also among adolescents who use cannabis. So as you might imagine, I think it's new. Marijuana and its products is the most commonly used illegal drug. And let me kind of getting close to elections, and I think people are doing very poor work addressing addiction. And I probably know, sadly, that Connecticut is in the top 4 states when you talk about overdose, fatal overdose per capita. Capita, I mean, if you divide the number of people who died, and the medical examiner claimed that they're concluded that they've died from an overdose, which is a conservative number, because sometimes it is determined. We have the highest with one of the top 4 ratios in the country. 2021, this is another presentation I'm usually making when I'm being invited, so feel free to invite me. 2021, 1,508 people in Connecticut were determined as dead to fatal drug overdose. And if you divide 3.6 million by this number, you get a very high ratio, which is one of the highest in the nation. So one of the problems is that a lot of politicians say about anything. They have an opinion about healthcare and other issues. And of course, I say I'm not a scientist, however, and this is actually a very funny, 7 funny books, sweet and sour, that gives all kind of examples from American political history, how outrageous statements have been made by politicians on the left and on the right about things they don't know much about. And I call it, I'm an independent, just to let you know, okay? I address every issue on its own merits and problems. And of course, some people say, no, you need to choose a side. I said, I don't need to choose anything. It's a free country. I address one issue at a time. Likewise with substance abuse issues. And I think that both the right and the left use what I call selective science. When it's convenient, they present certain facts. When it's inconvenient, they ignore them. This is what some kind of a cherry picking, which is not very helpful because we need to make decisions on health, mental health, and so forth. And some of these issues have political angles to them. And at the end of the day, the public is the one who's losing. So this is a very smart book if you're interested, kind of to read it and get a little bit, to chuckle and get upset at the same time. And of course, see, this is from The Economist. There's so much information, there's so much data, and all they got to do is fight with each other instead of saying, let's stick to the data. Okay, cannabis use. First of all, as you might imagine, a relatively smaller part of the population is using high percentage of cannabis or any other drug, meaning if you're a user, and especially if you suffer from substance use disorder, the likelihood you're going to use much more than some kind of an accidental weekend kind of, weed puffer kind of guy. No names mentioned, and you're not going to do a urine analysis, right? But you know what I'm saying? So basically, there's a lot of consumption by a certain percentage of the population. Male-female ratio is 3 to 2. Young age groups, of course, are disproportionately presented among the heaviest users. And perception of risk and benefit differ about what type of product to use, whether it's an old combustible cigarette weed, or now it's more common to use it in different ways, which can be vaporized, e-cigarettes, edibles, you name it, and the percentage is going up when we get to it. Every users versus never users perceive less risk and greater benefit, which is not surprising, right? If you think that it doesn't cause much damage, particularly when you're young, and it's fun and it's legal, quote unquote, hey, am I the only guy in town that is not using or in school? So that's part of the education. Say, hey, it's not so rosy. Another comment, you're probably familiar with it about alcohol. Studies at college show that students who drink heavily think that everybody else is drinking as well, and that other people drink as much as they do. So there is a perception, it's a little bit biased about what other people do. Like you hear it from your patients if you're with adolescents. What's your problem? Everybody does it. No, it's not true. I live in West Hartford, and every year or every other year, I think they have a high school study, epidemiological one, and I would say that about 1/3 of the population of seniors have at least experimented with cannabis. 1/3. Good news, 2/3 have not used it, meaning it's not everybody does it. So when I treat my adolescents and I get everybody does it, I say, listen, I can tell you, I understand, I hear it from many people because I want to do it very positively in a motivational interview approach. I understand your point of view, but I want you to know that science does not support it. A lot of people where you are, or the people you surround yourself with, are using it. But the majority of people do not use it. And if they use it, been there, done that, moved on. You don't, and you can't, and that's why you're treating. So the idea is when you negotiate with patients how to increase their motivation without stigmatizing them and making them feel too guilty, you say, listen, let's work a little bit on your perception on this issue. Or if you do motivational interviewing, you do the discrepancy thing, right? I'm sorry, some people sit behind me. I rather have it in the back, so I like to have eye contact, so I move around. So anyway, the idea is a lot of time you say to patient, I don't want change. I'm fine with my drug use. I'm in control. I have no problem. You're my problem, and this is an elective kind of intervention, so I don't have to be here. So when you do motivational interviewing, you take what they said with a little twist. You repeat what they said, but say, now or presently you said and you think this and that. It's fine. We just started this wonderful relationship, and if you continue to come and keep seeing you and treating you, working with you, maybe your perceptions will change while we are making progress. So that's kind of, I'm throwing in little things about how we work with our adolescents. We've also developed in the CBT study, the motivational interviewing, the CBT manuals. Which again, those of you who are not familiar with them, they're free of charge and you can get them. And if you don't know how to get them, shoot me an email. Okay, so this is an important epidemiological one. Okay. E-cigarettes and Juul, a huge problem. It actually, we got to the point that e-cigs and Juul are more commonly now used than good old, so to speak, joints. And the difference is that instead of burning the tobacco, burning the weed, you actually almost like boil and vapor it because it reaches, this fluid reaches to a boiling point, which is a lower temperature, and some people say it's healthier. It's not healthier. It's just another way of, you know, if you will, another port of entry, another way to use it. And we've found pretty clearly, I mean, at least in rats and mice, but it's probably the same in people because we know it from cannabis, that cannabis actually causes some impairment in the endothel that is lining our blood vessels. And particularly people, again, it's not adolescent, but people with heart issues. The use of marijuana can be actually detrimental to the health and even cause death because it's a vasodilator. It lets the veins and the arteries. Between 2018 and 2019, before COVID, e-cigs and Juul and other products of this sort use increased by 80%. Nothing has ever increased in 1 year in 80% besides COVID. We'll talk about that today. It has gone down a little bit, and people think they have too much time to think about it during COVID because we are all consumed by COVID. Look at the percentages in health schools. And also, if you just remember before COVID, there were reports of lethal pneumonia due to e-cigarettes. And the reason was that for some reason in the production process, they used vitamin E. Vitamin E is a lipid material. And when you smoke it, the alveoli cannot metabolize it. So basically, it's almost like imagine like you put plastic on something and you can breathe. So you have these lipid molecules that cause damage to alveoli, and there were at least 60 or 70 cases of death, including some adolescents. So that was another thing. But again, we forgot about everything because COVID pretty much overwhelmed us so much. So what is the new brave world of cannabis, by the way, a big deal. I've just heard a couple of months ago from Mark Gold, he's like the Bruce Springsteen of drugs, and the guy published like 1,000 publications, think about it. And he was a physician at Woodstock, 1969. And he started this concept of medical tent. Remember that some concerts are you have medical tents, if people pass out or something happens, there are some medics and some crew to take care of it. And he said, he was at Yale then. We took samples of marijuana from Woodstock. It was less than 1%. Why the heck they look so happy? It's nothing. Now you know marijuana, THC concentration is in the teens. Now, what does it mean concentration in this proper percentage? It's by weight. How much THC there is in whatever this grassy weed kind of thing that you do or use. Now it's in confiscated marijuana. There's about 20%, and all kind of other products such as tinctures and emulsions and shudder and all the stuff that you're familiar with. It can get to 80, 90, even 100%, which means it's almost like a bomb. It's like a hand grenade in your brain. So let me also give you an analogy, because if you talk with people, especially young people or parents, to say, what's the big deal? Here's the thing. Let's do a little quiz. What's the percentage of nicotine in an ordinary cigarette? Anybody? It's very little, maybe 0.5% or 1%. Okay? Now, coca leaves, that come from the Andes in South America, and the people who live in high altitude use them in order to increase a little bit their, their ability to work, because oxygen is very sparse there. What is the concentration of cocaine in coca leaves? 0.5%. That's all. You chew it, feel a little better, perhaps. And that thing. However, the cocaine, they get to the street. Think about it. One process is the coca paste it's like a cake. It's a dirty, ugly, brownish cake of 30%. However, what people really buy in the street is at least 60% good, high quality kind of, crystal cocaine. So think about it. But the industry from 0.5% all the way to 60. Imagine that cigarettes, nicotine, which is 0.5%, somebody would have found a way to make it 50%. Wouldn't blow your brain. But that's what they're doing right now with marijuana. People say it's harmless. So it was 1%, then it's in the teens. Now you can get 80, 90, 100%. It's a different animal in terms of dosage, in terms of impact. And I'll get to a couple of slides on schizophrenia and psychosis. Once you pass 10% of THC concentration, what the UK, British called SCAN, the chances, the curve to develop psychosis is going up very sharply. So I always give this information because nobody talks like this. I mean, this is my personal style. I said, as compared to what? To give you an idea, because if you never use cocaine, don't. If you ever use opiates, don't. But you smoke a cigarette and you know how strong it is, even just 0.5%, not to mention if they had to eat menthol or other things that in some states are trying to curb or basically forbid, especially e-cigarettes, even regular cigarettes, because it attracts young people. So this is really the story. Now, curb your enthusiasm, I'm a great fan of Seinfeld and Larry David. So before you also get excited by CBD, we don't know much about CBD as well as it has been advertised. And so we need more studies, which I'm for. And by the way, CBD also has side effects, but nobody advertises it. For example, it increases liver functions, which means it causes certain damage to the liver. You don't always know what you buy. And a lot of times it's not just the weight, how much you buy, but also the quality of it and what other stuff it can be added to it or laced. CBD laced with it, and by the way, one of my presentations, and maybe some other time, I have a lot of presentation, is about the overdose epidemic that we are witnessing and experiencing for so many years now, and every year it's getting worse and worse, is that some people are what you call innocent victims. They are not addicts, so to speak, who said, I'm going to take fentanyl because I like the buzz, and, we're all going to die, so let's get high. However, I mean, some people thought that they're using Ritalin, and it's basically CBD can be laced with fentanyl as well. So be aware of this, that anything is kosher, so to speak, for people to make some money. There's a baker, his name was David Glass. Check him online. He used to work in Connecticut, now he works in Vermont. He still makes amazing cakes, like unbelievable cakes. He comes every 2 weeks. Here I'm doing advertisement. Trust me, it's worth it. Check David Glass online. Every Sunday in Bloomfield, behind the Wells Fargo Bank, he comes with his SUV with boxes of cakes. And it's like a drug deal. You give him cash only, he gives you a box. His cakes to really to die for. But I'm mentioning it for very specific reasons. So check him online. Because now it also sells what he called love bites, which are like chocolate pieces with all kind of things inside. Guys, heavenly. However, if you want to buy a CBD infused love bites, it's 4 times more. I said, David, what the heck? And he's cool. He said, oh, it's almost like when you say, when you buy meat, it's hormones free, it's pesticide free, field that my neighbor is cultivating in Vermont, cannabis, and I'm buying it from him, and we make it together, and he sell it to 4 times more. So it penetrates by osmosis into our life in so many ways. And young people really, really get into it because it's special. What do you do? What do you do? What do you smoke? Forget about it. Let me tell you what is good. Someone tell about cakes. Guys, you don't know much about cakes. Check David Glass. The guy is amazing, truly, and he deserves the sales speech because they work very hard to make very, very good cake. But this is it. He's doing CBD infused stuff. If you want to bring somebody a present, the holidays are coming. I said, listen, I'm going to bring you something no one has ever brought. CBD infused love bite. Actually, getting a little bit kind of carried away. Think about your next Valentine's Day. Bring to your loved ones, CBD infused. Okay, I move on. Okay, enough of the seminar. Move on. But this is a good example how it becomes part of our culture, right? It's not like some some dude is using it somewhere like the dude in the movie.
Well, I think we're gonna move this a little closer so they can hear you better.
Okay.
We're gonna try, but you go, keep going.
Well, are you seeing it well in the back? Okay, if they do, don't bother.
No, I think it's for people on the computer.
The people who are. And this is also another cute funny. Now it's, people talk about narratives, evidence-based, but some people say, wait a minute, there are true facts and non-true facts as well, and interpretation. So that's a struggle we had when we try to persuade young people to use cannabis, and it's an uphill battle because everybody tells them how wonderful it is and how harmless it is. Okay. RML stands for recreational marijuana use, kind of to let you know. So what about youth behavior? First of all, there was a study done several years ago that in states where cannabis has not been legalized, young, adolescents stated in study that if it will become legalized for recreational purposes, they will use it. So the idea is more of them will use it and they will use more of it, which is an issue that we see right now in states where it's been legalized. And again, people try to confuse you and bring some other kind of studies, that many of the studies that are pro-legalization and pro-recreational marijuana legalization actually funded by the industry. There are other studies not funded by the industry that may not show increase or a significant decrease, and it has to do more with the methodology of it. But for example, the industry was objecting for a long time to have child proof bags for dispensaries, and also to stay within a certain recognized distance from places where kids hang out. Schools, playgrounds, house of worship. So this does not show a very good will, because it's pretty clear that income is based on the next generation of users. So we need these kids to use in order to make them hooked. And as you see, not everybody gets hooked, but those who do, this 10%, are high consumers. And for example, when adults use marijuana, the ratio is about 1 out of 11 will get addicted, so to speak, will develop cannabis use disorder. With kids, the rate is double, 1 out of 5, because it has to do with the fact that the brain is still developing and it's more susceptible and amenable to the influence of it. I'll explain to you exactly what's happening in the brain. So as you can see on those numbers, what's going on here. Another interesting issue that I know that tried sometime to push back in Connecticut, other places. So Colorado, the land of the free of marijuana, where in 2013 it has been legalized, everybody get excited. Some people move there with their kids, but listen, Denver is not Colorado, the same way that Amsterdam does not represent the Netherlands or Holland, meaning it's like Las Vegas does not represent the United States. Yeah, it's a place where certain things happen. I've been several times in Colorado in the last decade, and also our Research Society of Marijuana met there several times for annual meeting. And I can tell you that 2/3 of the communities in Colorado do not approve smoke shops, meaning you can do zoning and say NIMBY, not in my backyard. But we met in Colorado State University, which is in a lovely town, and it's one of those long western kind of streets where the smoke shops are next to the munchie shops and are next to the tattoo shops. So you don't need to walk or run very much to get all the product associated with this culture. So it's when it is there, they have so many ways to do it. And And this is a college town. Colorado State University is a large university, 30,000 people. I don't know. I mean, how they can study. I mean, that's surrounded by cannabis and also by alcohol. So that's the story. I don't think that you would like to move to a town like this if you have young children, or you'd like to have, instead of a grocery store, you would have, some kind of a retail store for cannabis when your kids go to school and waiting for the bus under the house. So think about it from pragmatic perspective, how, I mean, parents are horrified about it. Another comment, and again, it's part of the politics, and I know at some point I'll go over the time. One of the arguments is about equity, social justice. Let's have minority population and communities benefit from the new big industry. Wrong. You create more victims. The concentration of alcohol stores, package stores in minority communities is 8 times greater than in white neighborhoods. Secondly, proximity to where you get alcohol or where you get drugs increases the likelihood that people are going to use it. And it's not just the adults who buy it, it's also the young kids because it's part of the culture. So this mix and match of mambo jumbo of what we need to do socially and how we need to increase entrepreneurship, I would like to see it on other aspects of life and not on selling drugs to kids. And there's a big debate over it, but I don't know how this is going to pan out here in Connecticut. As I said, it's the wrong argument for the right reason. Okay, another issue is studies have shown about adolescents that subjective feeling of your first cannabis use amplify the association with its continued use and other drugs, and it makes sense. If you're a new consumer of a certain drink or food and you like it, you're probably going to do it again, right? So it's very interesting to know when people have biological vulnerability, how flavor and taste can affect their inclination to keep on using it, and then what becomes a use out of pleasure, which satisfies the reward system, becomes a compulsive use that it's difficult to stop, and that's basically what we call the stage of the brain disease, of the addiction, of the substance use disorder. And it's the same almost with every drug because the brain actually tries to protect itself because this is a foreign substance. But some of the changes the brain is going through are not definitely beneficial for the individual. And that's why it's almost like create pathways or empty creeks. Even if you haven't been used drug for many years, but if you have craving, or you use once after you've been, sober or clean or any term you want to use, it's like a flood. And it's difficult to resist because these pathways for reward and for compulsive behavior are ready. And again, I don't know what else is coming down the pike. Oregon has approved the legalization of psychedelics. And there are more stuff that's coming down the pike. And the question is, will it come down the pike quickly before good research will show what are the pros and cons? Or we would be able to stop it. But again, politicians, as I showed the slide, they just go with whomever vote. And if they feel that public opinion is moving left when it comes to these issues, then they will approve it. And there are casualties falling by the wayside. So bottom line, does liberalizing marijuana laws increase teen use and why it's so important? The answer is categorically yes. It has been found, this is a study published almost 8 years ago by 2 researchers. One is European and one is American. And they showed that just any change in legal status, like decriminalization, because there are several stages up to legalization for recreational, shows a change because young adolescents who are not using, believe it or not, the legal status of marijuana is important to them. Those who already use, they don't care anymore. But the legalization issue, the legal status of marijuana is a certain barrier. Once it being removed, as you saw from the study in states where it has not been approved yet legally, people are going to use it. So what do? We get an increase in first-time users, which are adolescents. We also get a decrease in the age of first-time use, which is another damage, adding, insult to injury. And that means that the earlier somebody starts to use alcohol and drugs, the higher the likelihood they'll become addicted, and that they will have other negative consequences and use other drugs. For example, if somebody starts using alcohol in the early teens versus at age 21, the ratio is 1 to 7, with the probability of developing alcohol use disorder. And you will see the same issue with psychotic disorder. So, and there's another issue is, for example, when you change the age of legal drug use, we learned about it from alcohol, right? When it went from 21 to 18, that it moved to 21. All these age changes were meaningful epidemiologically. And there's also what we call, you see on the bottom, the trickle-down effect. If you say, for example, I can drink at 18, like in most European countries and in Canada, but I'm 17, or I'm 16, I'm getting close. Why do I need to wait? So this trickle-down effect definitely is also impact. And I can tell you there were studies on alcohol. I mean, in the early 80s, when in some states, it moved up from 18 to 21, there are some measures of how many lives have been saved of when the difference from 18 to 21 has happened, and the increase in age. And it has been very meaningful, but people just forget about it. It was one of the examples that in Louisiana, the drinking age was 21 in the early 80s, and in Texas, they reduced it to 18. So young people during the weekend were driving on Highway 10, Texas, get loaded, and on the way back, all kind of crashes happened. My daughter, she's also in mental health right now, but she told me she wanted to go to UVM, University of Vermont in Burlington. She didn't go there anywhere. And I said, you're not going there. She said, why? I said, student in UVM drive to Montreal. They just cross the border, because in Canada, you can drink at 18. And I don't want you to be a casualty because somebody who was not supposed to drive and drink is doing it. So all these issues about prevention of our, adolescents are so meaningful if we understand how the brain is working, how the reward system is so pushy and demanding, and how the prefrontal cortex is supposed to provide inhibition and abstract thinking is not yet developed in a way that could make them say, wait a minute, don't do it or don't do it now. And usually, brain development, at least the way we know it, ends around age 25, although I know some people my age, it still hasn't developed to its fullest, but you know what I'm saying. Okay, I'll kind of go a little faster. This is kind of one of the examples about talking about the limbic system, which is a striatum, the reward system that is being, if you will, supervised by the prefrontal cortex. As you can see, in children, it's weak both sides, including the response. In adults, it's very powerful, the demand, but also response. In adolescents, unfortunately, the demand is very powerful, but the response is not so good in terms of inhibition. And it's not surprising because even in a normative adolescence, impulsivity and sensation seeking, which are very powerful when it comes to addictions, are also powerful with any adolescent, and they reach their peak at between age 15 and 16. So what do we do at age 16? We give our kids a present and a license to kill. We allow them to drive cars. Meaning that in the United States and other countries, in different eras, all kind of public health decisions were made by different panels. You can drive at 16, you can go to the military at 18, carry a gun and kill people, and you can drink alcohol only at 21. So when you think about it, I would say, okay, let's do everything either at 16 or 18 or 21 or even 25. Can we enforce it? Probably not. But in terms of what we call developmentally informed, when you work with young people, we need to use similar criteria and understanding principles to define why this public health policy is being adopted and when. Here I go again to this book. I'm not a scientist, but I have my opinion because I'm a politician and people voted for me, even though I'm totally ignorant. So this is what we're dealing with when we are the experts, and we need to express it to this politician that said, yeah, you got a point, but I probably won't get elected if I won't do this and I won't do that. And that's too bad. Okay, so this is a nice slide that you can actually find online as well. Now, why is marijuana so important to the brain? Well, there's no brain receptors for alcohol specifically, but there are brain receptors specific for marijuana. It's called CB1. There is a process during adolescence. Two important issues happen. The brain is getting more and more effective. The tasks that adolescents face become more and more complex. So they need a better way of transporting signals. So one of them is there is myelinization, the white matter that covers the gray matter, right? It's like when you have an electric wire and it's been covered. Actually, this myelinization improves the speed that electric stimulus are moving along. Secondly, is there's pruning of the synapses, like between these two nerves. Why is pruning important? Because the younger the brain is, the more clogged it is with all kind of pieces of wires and stuff. It's not very effective. Actually, when you prune it, like if you take care of it in the garden and give some kind of more air and space to your plants, things move faster. So this process is supervised by endogenous, from inside the body, cannabis system and cannabis receptors. Now, what you do when you use externalized marijuana, you overwhelm this inside, the endogenous system with marijuana from the outside, you paralyze it. It's like a flood. And that's the damage that's being done. The system is confused. And we, in adolescent, as we said, the brain function is improving. We need improved cognition. And marijuana is making, quote unquote, people lazy and stupid, so to speak, which means from our perspective, there's impairment of short-term, long-term memory, attention span, acquisition of new material. All these things are so important for young people. So, and given the fact that this is adolescents where they're being bombarded by hormones anyway, and their wakefulness, sleep cycles change. They become more like predatory night kind of owls, kids, adolescents compared to young people. And the way I portray it, because there's always been this big fight, now people realize that maybe the older kid should go to school later, not the younger kid. It doesn't work well because the bus drivers don't want it. So here you are, you see these adolescents standing at 6:30, sleepy, like zombies in intersection. They go to school, they wake up probably around 11, 12, and at 1:30 they go home. No wonder they don't learn anything. And on top of it, if they're going to use marijuana, good luck, because they can't acquire any information. And the use of marijuana in school double the rates of expulsion and of dropouts, and plus the fact that it's affected the process of learning, which is so important in this age group. So this is one of the major issues. People say marijuana doesn't kill. That's not the point if it does or doesn't. By the way, it does kill if you drive under the influence, but it causes developmental delays and damage. And also there are micro and macro changes in the brain itself. So I'll go over those issues very quickly, but you've got the slideshow, and anyway, you see I'm talking about executive function, decision-making, problem solving. Everything you need to do, the young person is being basically hampered. Even low levels of it cause damage in terms of the volume of the gray matter. So I do not see any reason whatsoever to support why marijuana is useful for adolescents. And marijuana is absolutely not useful for any psychiatric disorders for adolescents, period. at least scientifically, although some people claim all kinds of things, but this is not what we do. We talk about evidence-based. Here's a study that showed that use of marijuana long-term reduced the IQ by an average of 8 points. So when I brought this information to the kids I worked with, one of them said, no big deal, my IQ is 160. I said, look, not everybody is as smart as you are, But the bottom line is if the average of IQ is 100, you lose 8 points, it puts you in the 30th percentile compared to the rest of the population, which also diminishes your chances to get added education and to get into the working force. So all these issues are very, very important. And there's still a debate how much recovery of cognitive function happens once you stop using it, given of course, I'm claiming at the bottom that impairment depends on age of onset, recency, frequency, duration of use, concentration, and so forth. That's why the research is difficult. But bottom line is, don't do it at home and don't do it outside at home. There's absolutely no reason or no recommendation why adolescents should use marijuana. Marijuana is no good, and it's just going to cause damage. And by the way, as you know, when kids do something, their friends pretty much adopt the same behavior. So that's definitely another issue. It's not peer pressure, it's more like peer approval issue. And of course, some people do both cannabis and alcohol, and it causes major problems. So in a nutshell, past 20 years cannabis harmfulness switches summary. Driving under the influence double lethal car crashes. Increase in emergency room referrals. So instead of treating people who have heart attacks or strokes or COVID, you need to use these people who are, intoxicated and sometimes use this facetious story, but when you know it. If you're a parent, you take your adolescent kids to the Xfinity Center nearby to see a show, and where do you pick them up? Out for hospital emergency room, because they got so intoxicated to the point that, their life has been in danger. And that's a reality of pre-COVID and, post-COVID when people, have resumed going to concerts. Early onset psychosis, increased risk for suicide, increased risk for suicidal behavior and non-suicidal self-injury. Cardiovascular arrhythmias, myocardial infarction, strokes in young and adults, potential testicular cancer, and hyperemesis syndrome, which is some people who use marijuana for quite a while, even though some people say, well, it's anti-emetic. That's why we give it to people who have cancer or some other problems with nutrition. But those cases are that there is intractable vomiting that actually can be stopped only by taking almost boiling water showers. There's a certain mechanism in the body that the change of temperature affects this. So people, this is what people do. It's amazing. So anyway, of course, people from the industry there said, scare tactic. The Kaminer is a no good preacher. And I can tell you, I used to get hate mail, which I really like. So it goes like this, and I'm going to write on it one day. So first of all, they write to you, you're probably an agent of the industry of the tobacco, alcohol, or pharmaceutical industry. You don't want a new kid on the block to get into the market, which is cannabis, which is great for everything. It's like aspirin. Secondly, they start to get a little bit angrier and angrier. Secondly, you don't really understand very well the studies. And by the way, I've been in several Connecticut Senate committees where it was pretty clear they were trying just to push me to say, no, it's great, and they didn't get it. It was really a twilight zone since. Then the third issue, to get even angrier, your research is not such a big deal. You're not, such a, great scientist. And the fourth one, now they come to the research, we hate you. You're idiot and you're stupid and we don't like you. Okay, so let's start with the end of it. You know what I'm saying? Because people don't argue anymore about anything right now, debate. They don't even want to hear what the other side said, whether it's left or right, and also including marijuana. It becomes an emotional issue. And
I'm doing what I'm doing because I'm trying to save the health of young people, and some people hate me for this because it stopped them either for making more money or for promoting their idea that anybody can do whatever they want regardless of the consequences to themselves or to others. No can do in my book, but hey. So I got this email from this medical student in Iowa. I remember that, and he wrote to me. He didn't wish me death, thank you, but he said, "I'm hoping that they will take away your medical licensure." And I said to him, "Listen, I've worked in my research, but more than 30 years of it's 2,000 adolescents. I have a lot of experience, and I'm doing it for a living, and I'm doing it because this is my passion and my mission. So I'm representing the victims here, okay, not the perpetrators. So if you'll ever make it to Connecticut, come over for a cup of coffee at Yukon and we'll talk." And then he wrote back to me, "You don't sound like a bad person." Thank you. That's what I did. So I'm like doing therapy online with a passionate young student who said, "Kill them all. If they disagree with us, kill them all," which is exactly what's happening here in the country right now. So how do you convince people who, at least to listen? Because if they don't want to listen, that's where we are. So what is brain morphology changes, micro and micro, are actually the area that are responsible to some degree to psychosis, that you find them in schizophrenia, that there's some micro and macro changes in the morphology. You see very similar results in after smoking marijuana. Maternal and paternal use, epigenetic effect on offspring. There are more studies on maternal use. It's very interesting. Actually, pregnant mothers who are using cannabis, the most significant effect, it's really interesting, different from other drugs, are being shown in early adolescence. Not like immediately like with cocaine or with opiates or opiate withdrawal symptoms or alcohol withdrawal symptoms, fetal alcohol syndrome. You see it later, so you need longer follow-up. So, and by the way, THC and CBD interact with a large number of medications, including many psychiatric disorders that you use. So if you provide somebody with medications for depression, for psychosis, and you need to know if they use, not kind of to punish them or whatever, but say, I need to make changes. I remember when I started psychiatry, a lot of patients were treated with what we call the first generation of antipsychotics, such as Largactil and so forth. They were smoking. And then we find out that nicotine basically impairs or competes with the antipsychotic medication with same receptors. So you need to ask them to stop, which they won't do, or you need to increase the dosage because there's a competition on the synapses. And there's more and more finding about secondhand cannabis exposure effects also that affect cardiovascular function and stuff. So what's so great about legalization? So let's revisit the promises, especially the way it's been legalized here. It will raise tax revenue. True. However, like with alcohol and cigarettes, it also increases the negative effect and negative consequences. So for every cent you get from alcohol taxation, costs you 5 to 10 cents to take care of the damage that's associated with it. Some of them you can't even evaluate well, like loss of working days, although some people try to do it, some economists. How do you measure life of somebody who was driving or being hit by a drunk car or somebody who was smoking a joint? So that's definitely, some people make a lot of money, but as a community we lose. It also, money will be spent on treatment for addicts. Have you seen, Dr. Podolsky, any giant increase in your resources? It's the same story, those of you who've lived there long enough. When the casinos opened, they promised that 2% of the income of the casinos will go to treatment of compulsive gambling. A couple of years, they said, let's put it in the general coffers. That was the end of it. We put criminal out of business. That's not true, absolutely not true. They're already organized. The cartels grow marijuana. These guys are always a step ahead. And New York State wanted, again, in terms of equity, they want to put people who got out of jail or had marijuana related offenses to run stores, to give them a second chance. What have they been smoking? These people are so well connected. If they would know immediately with whom to connect the black market, how to increase the income. And there's so many other issues here. It's just unbelievable. But again, to try to convince the public many times is ignorant because they don't take the time necessary to read. They just look at the headlines. The headlines usually are pro marijuana. Unless you have like these mothers who hugged me before the hearing and said, our kids are psychotic. My kid has been hospitalized because he was vaping 80-90% THC. Go get them, you know? And they were really trying to discredit us. And anyway, they ended up winning at the end of the day. You know, this is it. This is people we put in the Senate. I have all kind of information here. I can stop right now that shows you how traffic deaths related to marijuana increase. Marijuana is addictive. People used until a few years ago to say it's not addictive. Yes, it is addictive. There's so much increase of opiate use. It's one of the issues that, you know, I'm going to stop with the next couple of slides. That you don't wake up in the morning at 12 or 13 and inject heroin, right, guys? You know that better than anybody else where you work. You start with something, you drink alcohol, you smoke cigarettes, you do some joints. And there's pretty clear data that shows that there is, not for everyone, but there is a certain kind of pathway. And there have been some studies published in very good journals, like American Journal of Psychiatry. Look at the bottom. Cannabis use appears to increase the risk of developing non-medical prescription opioid use and opioid use disorders in adults without pain disorder, apropos. And I'll show you one last thing. This is a data set that was collected in Connecticut Shoreline on 5,000 adolescents by Art Swindell. That shows you how dramatically teen cannabis users may increase 14 times, you don't see it under the video, 40 times abuse of pain meds, 4 times of heroin, and 5 times more of other drugs. So let me stop here so you have enough time for questions. There are some more slides here, but I think the message is clear, and I'm ready to answer questions or hear comments.
I have a couple of questions, actually. First of all, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us today. And I specifically found the information you presented on like the biological processes and brain function, especially surrounding like the vulnerability of the youth brain as helpful. You had asked, what can we do to convince people? And I'm wondering perhaps if maybe I felt like there was a lot of like ignorant, stupid, lazy talk around kind of the other side. And so I don't know if that was a serious question about what we can do to convince people, but there were a handful of topics that I feel like kind of weren't presented the other side of. So for example, the Journal of the AMA reported that, you know, there's no significant association between adult use and use among high school students. It was like a study of like 1.4 million people. In addition, the you know, just various things around Denver, Colorado, and how like there's no, the reduction of crime, it doesn't correspond to the amount of dispensaries. There was just no evidence of that. Johns Hopkins, for example, said that vaping is significantly less harmful, but it's still harmful. But again, some of the stuff that's presented, I felt like I kind of wasn't hearing the other side, and the politicians that are just ignorant, and even about racial disparities and how African Americans are, you know, arrested 4 times more likely than whites, yet both ethnicities consume, you know, at the same rate. So there are these really genuine problems, but then there's also the really real stuff, like you mentioned, with, you know, youth. And I wonder if we're conflating youth and adult. Like my dad was dying of cancer last year. Marijuana was a game changer for him. He'd never smoked a joint in his life. And it just made so many things better for him. So again, if that's a serious question about what we can do, I know for me, I think it would be helpful if maybe the tone was a little less like, wow, there's absolutely no value and no reasons. That's kind of the vibe I got today. And I may have lost some of the messaging around the youth stuff, which I think is so important. So just wanted to share that and then see if you think there would be benefit from kind of sharing the other side of the studies that contrast to what you've shared.
Counting to three, because you throw so much stuff, for me, there's no other side. I work with the vulnerable. I work with the people that we're trying to save their life and their quality of life. Everybody throw this study and that study, and you read this one, you read that one. We try to synthesize the information so people like you, which I believe work in the trenches, would know what is the likelihood that this is the present state of the art and how we should plan on going forward. That's what I've been doing in my long history. And yes, I am opinionated about it because the people say, why don't you have a balanced approach? There's no balanced approach. Definitely not for adolescents and people with mental health issues. Grown-ups can do whatever they want. They are, I take the biblical analogy, they are the desert generation. They'll never make it to the promised land. They can do whatever they want. We tried our kids to guide them to get to the promised land. And there's a book called Smart But Distracted, with an A, not with a U, that shows that what parents need to do is to give a temporary and sometimes permanent loan of the frontal cortex to the kids, because the kids are too impulsive and too sensation seeking. That's part of development. The generational gap is both a blessing and a curse. So I'm taking a leadership position. I'm making very strong statements. I can support all of them or most of them to a high degree with 1 or 2 standard deviation to the mean. And a lot of people are trying to, throw some stones or sand or whatever. I mean, you haven't done it, you've been very courteous. I don't want to be nice about it. Every life I save, every psychosis I prevent is good for me. And it's good for everybody else. And I see the parents and I see the kids. And I am updated to the Yazoo up to a minute ago, because that's what I do. One of my jokes is that my greatest fear is when I give a talk, somebody said, excuse me, Dr. Kaminer, have you by any chance read the last issue of the Mongolian Journal of Psychiatry, which was published last night and basically showed that everything you talk about is non-value? That's not the case. I'm also, as I mentioned, member of, SAM, that, is not partisan, left or right, but try to control and curtail what the industry is doing, and the fact that the rate of money being infused to the media is 8-1 from the industry, and the media is all over for it. As I mentioned earlier, I don't know if it was recorded or not, look at the Arthur Current from the 17th. This lady, she doesn't have an email, so I went right back to them, was talking about the stigma of more women using marijuana and how bad the stigma is, because polls show that the public is for marijuana. I can tell you that if you read the polls well, and if you look at them from a very scientific perspective, I don't mean you personally, because I like this criticism, because it kind of wakes me up, as you can see, is that if decriminalization have been adopted for personal use all over the country, the percent of Americans who vote for legalization for recreational purposes will be under 50%. The media is not mentioning it. Most of the media is biased, and the industry doesn't mention it because it doesn't look good. So what happened last week? Our president, great guy, I like him. I like Joe. He speaks things the way they are, whether I agree with him totally or not. He pardoned everybody, 6,500 people. That's not a lot for the country, 330 million people, who have some marijuana position. Most of them, by the way, there's a percentage breakdown that he didn't show because he's not a scientist, had some other offenses and others. Fine, we cleaned them. Immediately the industry jumped to say, aha, this is a pathway to recreational legalization. There's nothing to do with it. Very few of these people, if at all, got any penalties. And there were similar studies in Canada that now, is approved it all. So bottom line, tell your kids not to use marijuana. It's not good for them. Only bad things can happen, and not everybody will become psychotic or everybody going to be run over
but there's nothing good about it. If it is a self-medication kind of approach, find other ways to be happy, to be liked, to do this and to do that. And prevention, apropos my life sentence, should start in early elementary school. Middle school is too late because we see a decrease in age of first use of marijuana. And this barrier, when it's broken, it increases the likelihood that your kid will develop cannabis use disorder, your kid will become suicidal. Odds ratio of suicide 3.46. 3.46. This is huge. Marijuana doesn't kill. Excuse me, BS. Thank you. Anybody else? Bring it on. I mean, especially people who disagree, because this is so important. I see you all as ambassadors. You need to go to the communities, have the most recent knowledge of this fact. And yeah, you can argue with people, but one of them just throw things at you. But they won't. Take away the mic.
Does anyone here have questions?
What was it, Mr. Jackson, I'd call it?
Sorry.
Something malfunction, what is it called, custom malfunction?
That's a level of tackle.
Yeah. Oh, we have a malfunction.
Oh, you were.
Yeah, go ahead.
Doc, I'm sorry, I'm just going to use the bathroom. Not saying nothing bad or anything like that.
Is somebody gonna give him a tube for a second? Okay,
Exactly.
go ahead.
So, I work in emergency part-time for the
Where,
Bristol.
okay.
Why do you see so many, that's where I'm stuck with this, like the amount of psychosis and the amount of people getting admitted to the hospital for that vomiting situation is out of control.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, honestly. Look, I don't want to be like Nostradamus kind of say, I want, when bad things happen, you remember me. We don't want these bad things happen. So we need to start so early with adolescent children, starting it on. It's no good. Make sure you know what the friends of your kids, what's happening in their homes, if the parents are using, all kind of stuff. Because these are little things, but they're so detrimental. Kids are so impressionable, good and bad. And this is what we do in terms of prevention. So somebody said, the other side, who's the other side? Don't give me the other. Oh, we didn't do it on purpose, by the way. We didn't just cut you off, One of the ladies you just mentioned, she worked in an emergency room that she see the increase in hyperemesis syndrome and acute psychosis with people where you find cannabis in the system. So I don't want to be right for the sake of I told you so. I want to be right so we will do what you and I agree upon. Problem solving, let's try to agree upon it. Start prevention at a very early age. Has nothing to do with politics, has to do with the life, the quality of life of our kids. And yes, I'm sorry, most politicians are ignorant about this issue. They got some people who work for them that gives them a line or two to talk about because they don't have time to read, because they run around and try to schmooze it with people who would vote for them. Actually, it's really interesting. Like, what's his name? Dr. Oz, that is running for Senate position or something in Philadelphia. They interviewed him, but it wasn't long enough. I really wanted to hear what he says about several issues that have to do with medical aspects we don't talk about. We don't talk about drug use, we don't talk about abortion, we don't talk about issues that the medical establishment need to express an evidence-based opinion because the narratives are left or right. I am independent, I'm a scientist, I want to know what the data is, I know things can change, but I want to understand where we're heading because we need to provide the public with reliable information. Who will bring reliable information? Fox News or CNN? None of them. None of them. We need to have something neutral, but nobody gonna subscribe to it because it's not so interesting. Any other comments here or there or whatever? You just got me going, guys. I mean, this is such an important stuff. I'm so passionate about it.
Yeah, it's probably a different presentation, obviously, but using cannabis in cancer patients and that type of stuff. There is an application for that. That's just a separate kind of concept. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, I will surprise my colleague over there.
I cannot condone, I cannot say anything about people who tried everything. If they have terminal illnesses or they have some problems, they don't know how to deal with this. For example, autism. Some other asked me, what about autism? We don't have good studies yet, but some people don't want to wait. The same way we didn't wait with AIDS. But what I'm saying is, if the behavior or if the suffering is at such level, so yeah, we use it what we call off-label, right? The term. I got it. I got it. If some people, have cancer and want opioids or want cannabis in order to suffer less. On the other hand, we don't talk about euthanasia. I mean, we talk about some other things. But again, it's all politics. But no, I don't have any issue. And I'm sorry to hear about your father, the same way that I'm sorry to hear about other people that have intractable pain and use opioids and or cannabis. And cannabis doesn't necessarily replace opioid for pains. It's an entire science. And by the way, I do not pretend to be a pain. Maybe I am a pain, but not to be a pain scientist. But again, things are not so black and white, so dichotomous. Things go along a dimension. That's not the point. As I said, I'm focused on young people and people with mental health issues. And these are the people I'm trying to protect from marijuana because it's no good for them. Marijuana has not been approved for any mental health issue. Wait, before you jump and tell me PTSD, so I can tell you what's the state of the art of PTSD. The latest meta-analysis does not show it helps. However, we have a conflict. The conflict is that we feel for veterans, and some of them claim that it helps them deal with PTSD and TBI. So it's difficult to say to them no. However, studies on veterans showed that those who believe, that's a power of placebo to some degree, that the expectation is very important in everything, at work, in relationship, in also disease management. Those who believe that cannabis would ease their PTSD symptomatology are doing better than those who don't believe so and do not take marijuana. So different strokes for different folks. The negative aspect, because you guys are all mental health therapists, is that veterans who take cannabis for PTSD are less amenable to switch to psychotherapy and stand on their own feet. It's almost like the Pisa Tower. And the analogy, if you work with people who have panic attacks and do not want to or can't take the Xanax or other medication because what's the problem with the panic attack? It's a panic from the next panic attack, right? What the problem with craving when you use opioids is when will you get the next fix? So this is why your behavior is focused only on the next fix, and that's why you don't do well on other aspects in life. So getting back to these veterans who are supposed to be employed, supposed to be fathers, husbands, sons, whatever, all they're focused about is they need to smoke, they need weed, need this, that, and they're not amenable to the psychosocial intervention. So that's something we need to take into consideration. So I'm not saying yes or no, I'm just saying, let's be very clear about what we know and what's working. Of course, if somebody sits in my office and says, I need to use it, I can't do anywhere else, or I'll self-injure myself, commit suicide, I'm not going to push them. I said, let's keep on working, and hopefully we'll get to the point you'll be willing, before you jump to the pool of psychotherapy, to make some changes, because we need you to be in a position of using your full capacity, and you cannot from now on stay addicted, and you're addicted to cannabis for the rest of your life. So that's my take on this. So I'm sorry, but I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, but no apologies. Somebody needs to take this track. Otherwise, we won't make it to the promised land, or at least less people will make it to the promised land. I don't know, any other comments, any other questions? You know, guys, we have a lot of issues to deal with, so we need all the help that we can get. We need everybody to be on board. We need to get the resources. We need the politicians to make what we call informed decisions on stuff, not just based on the narrative. And that's where I'm expecting the public, and if not the public, at least the expert in the public, in each and every domain, to be the ones who bring it on to the politicians.
Anything else?
I know that I exhausted you guys. It's okay. I'm just warming up. I'm telling you, I become a motivational speaker because it's so important to me. It is. It is. That's what I do, and that's I want at least people to know most of the facts, even if some of them you may disagree here and there. But the bottom line, people need to know where we are, where we're heading, and I have very bad feelings about the fact that the industry, if you want control it, by the way, even in Connecticut, they didn't put a threshold to dosage into percentage. 10%, 15%, 90%. I just told you the story about the cocaine and nicotine. And it has been done purposefully, maliciously. So, oh, Dr. Kaminer, I do this dialogue with myself. You have a conspiracy theory. It's all about money. It's all about money. It's all about, your board and your shareholders. You want to make money. If you can sell enough nicotine in the US of A, you sell it to minors in Asia or in some countries that some dictators want to get the money from you. So the analogy that I give, and allow me to end it with this, is imagine that we open a new road for cars and pedestrians. There's no speed limits, there's no sidewalk, there's no traffic light, there's no crossing, and everybody is invited to walk there and drive there. This is exactly what they're doing here. Even in Canada, there were very intelligent discussions, and an entire issue of International Journal on Medical Policy was devoted to it. The people who were pro, compared to people who were against, said at the end of the day, they admitted, it's a social experiment. Yeah, but it's a Pandora box. Once you take off the lid, get away.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you. You're still as fired up as when I was in medical school.
It's a strength and a weakness because it's not, evidently, as you can hear by my accent, I wasn't born in this country. I'm a Middle Eastern, I'm Mediterranean. We speak our mind. I mean, we don't just tiptoe around things, whether you agree or not, but I stand by evidence-based issues. I'm not selling you some kind of product to make money. I'm just trying to save the people that you all try to save. I just want to give you some ammo. When people tell you something, say, no, that's not like that. Don't cite me and say, oh, you listen to Dr. Kaminer. No, I said, there are references. There are references in my book. There are references in my publication. There are references other people wrote. They're all over the place. It's not that somebody came and became, it's not church, right? Or whatever. It's not Yankees versus Red Sox. It's real stuff. That's what we're doing. And also, when you talk with some of your patients who've been through a lot, and they're a great resource if they're, getting stabilized and being in a better place to help in terms of prevention. That's why we have NA, AA, and any kind of A. It's covered people understand it. They also understand that their family, their kids are at high vulnerability. So I can say, if you come from a family with alcoholism, there's a 30% chance you become alcoholic if you drink. However, look at the bright side. If you're not going to drink, you will not become an alcoholic. It's the same way if you won't get exposed to bee sting or to peanuts, if you're allergic to it. And the previous president, Donald Trump doesn't drink. There's a lot of problems, this guy, we know that, but he doesn't drink because he comes from a family of alcoholics, and his brother died, I think, 2 years ago because of negative consequences of alcoholism. So that's kind of part of it. People understand when you come from a family where you have a history that you really, really need to help yourself. And if you can't, at least help your kids and the next generation and the next generation. And it's important for them to understand why this is not good for them. So that's definitely part.
Thank you. This will be on the Advanced Recovery Institute website, and then
Okay.
your presentation will be on there and all the resources as well. So thank you very much. And thank you, Ray, for setting up and being our tech specialist there.
Excuse me, but there was a comment. Somebody wanted you to touch on the extract CBD value from the marijuana plant versus THC.
What's the question? Sorry?
It's in the chat. She's asking if you could touch on the extract CBD value from the marijuana plant versus THC.
Okay, this is work in progress. I don't think I have a clear guideline, but we know that studies are about the ratio between CBD and THC, which people are trying to work on. What aspects are more or less, if you will, helpful to some interventions, I agree. You also need to take into consideration if what you're getting is really CBD, because it's not FDA approved, and whether some of the products have been laced with CBD. People need to check liver enzymes and functions. So I would say make progress very cautiously instead of, again, we always like new things. Say, oh, CBD for anything, for everything. Yes, a lot of people probably will do that, but I think the message we need to bring is this is not a panacea. This is an interesting formula that we need to look at, but we know there are 500 or 600 different products from cannabis. So we don't know which one is which. We don't know what combinations, what are the ratios, and I know that some people are working on it right now. So there's no clear answer for it right now. I'm very cautious at responding to it. I would love to see something comes up, and I'd like to see marijuana, cannabis move from, in terms of regulation from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2, for example, and people are working on it. But again, I don't want totally all the doors to get open, and then young people say, oh, it's CBD. How do you know it's CBD? How much THC in the CBD? They found that 1/3 of packages of CBD, the weight wasn't the same. The concentration wasn't the same. It's not well regulated, so handle with care.